Well, hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the ESM Session Everything Service Management podcast. Today, really great episode planned for you folks because we've got a great guest with us, Viktor Petermann, who's joining us from Estonia. And Viktor will tell us a little bit more about himself in just a second. I'm joined, as always, with my co-host and co-star, Sunil.
Hello.
There we go. Viktor, great to have you with us. Thanks for taking some time out to talk with us today. Again, for our audience, if you could just give us perhaps a brief introduction to yourself, and then we'll kick off with some talking points, if that's okay.
Thank you, Daniel, and hello, Daniel. Hello, Sunil. Hello, everyone. So I will try to start with a brief introduction of myself. I'm soon up to actually 30 years or close to 30 years in technology transformation and business development within major financial institutions in Baltics. Estonia is one of the Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and also Swedish market. And then when I was thinking of kind of my overall development, I would say that I see it a bit also like as other things develop in the world with a spiral, I also see that my learning is also a bit of that with four major stages. So firstly, I started actually as a deep technology guy. I was doing some programming, network administration, IT operations center, backup, recovery, you name it, like failover of the clusters and so on and so on. And then I actually switched over to developing a business continuity. And on that moment, I have realized that building something sustainable long-term actually requires maturity across multiple layers, requires discipline. And that was a time when I actually have learned these fancy things like ITIL, COVID, CMMI, etc. But they helped me to actually put view of the world on how to actually develop a systematic approach and long-term approach combining people, process, and technology into one service delivery. And maybe a bit rushing ahead, but this is actually what DORA is doing today. Mm-hmm. If you look into essence of DORA, it's also looking on how to put those different things into end service delivery to the customers. So then I have been kind of working around and playing with those frameworks, and then I also understood that they're actually quite complex and need to be put together, especially if you try to put those different things like COVID, ITIL. Everyone developed their own, and then I was looking on how to put it together, and then actually my main finding was that the best thing to put things together is actually a long IT service lifecycle. So you take the end delivery, you look on activities, what is process? Process is way of doing things, and decisions. And if you align those activities and decisions across lifecycle, eventually things get much simpler. And then it's also possible to develop it more into agile way of working and so on. And besides that, I was also doing some major transformation. I was managing consolidation of 2 IT organizations, ending up with 1,600 people. Then my third phase was business management. So first was technology, second was service management governance, and it was business management. I started with kind of bridging business and technology as business head of business architecture. And then I actually moved into business, developing digital payment strategies, offering pricing. And that was also time when PSD2 directive came into play. And it was interesting time, actually. I don't know much, guys, how much you know about PSD2, but to put it in short, idea of PSD2 was to actually enable platform for any payment initiator to use banking infrastructure to make payment. And you cannot charge on top. So you can charge only your customer as much as customers are used to pay for payment. And if charge is zero, it means zero. So banks have all the responsibility for AML, know your customers, etc., onboarding, offboarding, management, churn, etc. But just for payments, cannot really earn. And then that was a time when we needed to actually develop and rethink customer offering to widen the proposition. And again, we are coming back to understanding what actually customer needs. And now I'm back in technology as head of service integration and management, but with new paradigm. So it is now microservices, cloud, a lot of service providers. If when I started there was few of clusters, now there are thousands of CIs to manage, or hundreds of thousands of CIs to manage, and hundreds of suppliers, and etc. So it's a bit of a spiral learning. I don't know, was it short, but that's a
No, but certainly speaks to the wealth of experience, over 30 years and coming through that kind of career trajectory. So it's going to be great to hear a little bit more from you. Sunil, I think you had a fantastic opening kind of talking point for Viktor, so I'll hand the mic to you.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for that intro, Viktor. Right, so I think what you've described there in your experience is exactly why you're the right guest for this sort of conversation. So you have seen a lot of technology change in your time, right? You have seen a lot of societal change, right? I think if your experience in the Balkans 30 years ago and you look back on it, it's a very different place now, right? I would guess. So you've seen a lot of change there. And there's been a lot of regulation, a lot of change certainly in the banking sector, but in the business world as well, right? So thinking about all of these things, thinking about the complexity there, if you look at a leadership role in IT today, what do you think are the sort of characteristics that make for a great leader or a great technology leader?
Yeah, thank you, Sunil. You're right. It's very dynamic world. And as you also said, actually, its complexity is increasing, customer demands increasing, regulators have expectations. So it's a lot of expectations everywhere. And yes, in order to manage it, you actually need to be able to combine and juggle that complexity. And at least what I have seen so far, what is the most important thing in order to navigate through the woods, firstly is real understanding of customer needs, because that actually helps to put priorities. So as we saw, it's a lot of new things emerging, new demands, etc. How to navigate, how to understand what is important, what's not. So then it's really a guiding star which says, this is what is required for customer. And that's also a bit of why I have been developing my career like this, starting from an engineer, actually building more on a path on how to connect through the layers. And I think that's another need for current leaders, is actually ability to integrate, ability to consolidate the same kind of key principles which probably many of us have learned in ITIL and other training, people, process, and technology, into a holistic model which actually delivers on the target when we could understand what is important and what's not. And when building that, I think what other thing important is also to understand where in maturity organizations are. So these new approaches with more items, more suppliers, more tools are actually more complex, inherently more complex. And it is more of a distributed system. So when we started some time ago, like I don't remember that time, but maybe some people remember, it was mainframes, mid-range servers, blades, virtual machines, now it's containers, etc. So amount of elements is growing, and it all requires better maturity to manage all of that complexity, how to put those things together. Also, myself, I was thinking of this shift from a perspective that some time ago there was a conveyor developed. And we can also look on initial ITIL 2 as a set of processes, set of conveyors, how to develop. Nowadays, it's more of a craftsmanship, where instead of a conveyor, where actually every step is standardized and there are people, there are controls, how things need to be done. Now the small teams need to deliver on everything. They need to, design, deploy, maintain, ensure security, reliability, etc., etc. It is requiring more of maturity, more of understanding of everything. So nowadays, tools allow us to be more efficient in doing many of the things, but you still need to have knowledge, maturity, and ability to integrate and understand how do they work together, and then connect it back to the end service for a customer.
I love, by the way, and I know, Dan, you've got a follow-on question here, but I love, Viktor, that your starting point and your end point there was, what is it that you need to do in order to serve the customer, right? What are their expectations around product, around service, around ongoing support for those products and services? So I think that's exactly right. It starts there and it ends there, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean that's the reason we're doing all of this stuff, right? To fulfill a request, a requirement, or a want, or a need. So yeah, would completely echo your thoughts, Sunil. And just on that kind of, you've touched on the changes in technology over time. You gave some great examples just now, and given that that's not going to kind of slow down anytime soon, I think a lot of people would think it's sped up of recent months and years with the development of things like AI and all of the talk around that and what the potential is there. Within what is a very regulated industry, Viktor, how are you approaching kind of that innovation versus stability kind of scales there? Because in the market, people have to be innovative, bringing new products, new exciting things to hopefully win more customers, whatever way, shape, or form that looks like. But you've got to back it off against all of the security and regulatory concerns and requirements. What's the sort of approach that you've found works well to balance that?
Yeah, well, it's actually a very good question. And coming back, I think it's, to put it short, it's actually ability to manage complexity, and then also readiness to and understanding, again, coming back to that, what is needed for customers. But maybe before we go into that, I actually thought of a couple of examples of kind of what was inspiring me as a leader, and I thought of three. So first one, I would actually like to maybe reflect a bit. You probably know Matsushita Company and Konosuke Matsushita. And when I was reading a book about him, that was very interesting to find that this divisional structure, this end-to-end responsibility, which is now agile and all the world, was actually developed by him and found out and insisted by him. So he, in his first companies, which was developing bicycle lamps, I think it was lamps, electrical sockets, radios, he actually made those three divisions, which were end-to-end responsible for the thing. I hope you all see some similarities with agile. And then also his obsession with customer experience. So firstly, his first product, bicycle lamps, was actually where he allowed customer to bring those lamps back if they are not satisfied. On that moment, it was actually a brave move. And that was a startup company which was not rich. So I think he was actually taking quite some risk in order to do that. But as technology was this much better, he was able to make this promise. He knew that this is a good product. So this focus on reliability and also his trust to people. When there was a downturn in the company, instead of layoffs, what he did, he retained all the people, decreased time which they need to spend, but all the people were retained. And of course, I think with this type of leadership, I think it's a great opportunity actually to keep the company running, where people really understand that they are trusted for sure and they're needed for sure, because I think many companies in case of Dunton actually go a slightly easier way. Then another of Kichiro Toyota. I will not go into details. We all know of this Toyota production system, team empowerment, quality as a source. But here's this Jidoka. For me, it's still amazing that it was allowed to stop a conveyor if defect cannot be fixed. Can you imagine in production stopping the conveyor? It's extremely expensive thing. But that was, for me, that was also highest trust in the people that they actually do the job and that they do the job right. And last but not least, Steve Jobs. And here we're coming a bit into innovation. You probably know that he was visiting Xerox PARC Labs, and those guys have actually developed a lot of good technology. Object-oriented programming, computer networks, and graphical computer interface. And then what Steve Jobs did, he actually took those kind of good ideas, understood that graphical computer interface is something what customers would love, and made it happen. And I think this is actually quite a lot the same also nowadays, when we need to kind of balance the regulation, when we need to deliver on the things. It is important for us to keep in mind a customer view. Regulation as such actually is not a bad thing. I like living in a house which is built according to regulation, so I know it will not fall because of a bit stronger wind. And I see regulations of being of two types. One are which are there to ensure delivery, like DORA, to some extent PSD2, obviously a lot of security standards, needs, etc. And then there are standards which are for customer protection. And with any regulation, it's always easy to maybe go a bit too much in regulating, especially with customer protection, because it depends on our assumption what is the level of knowledge of the customer. And lower the level of knowledge regulator assumes or puts into regulation, more regulation comes. Mm-hmm. But we don't touch on that. I think this is a separate part. I think this is where maybe regulator could think of, we assume that everyone has basic, school education, understand physics, etc. So we don't go there. It is understandable that drying a cat in microwave is not a good idea, but other things are fine. And then when it comes to DORA, as I mentioned, I think it's actually common sense. When I was thinking of this podcast and of, again, coming back to Konosuke Matsushita, and I found some videotapes which we filmed like some 20 years ago, and then I had a video player. This Panasonic still works. So some companies have developed such a good thing even without a regulation, so things last. And I think this is something what actually today is expected, that we build the thing according to best understanding how they need to be built, understanding best customer intentions, and then if integrate reliability, security into product design, then we actually get what customers like and want. And it is a resiliency and compliance and regulation by design.
Viktor, one of the, it's interesting if you think about different regulatory approaches, say in Europe versus the US. And you could argue, couldn't you, that the US is a more innovative culture. Perhaps they accept risk more readily. And so as a result of that acceptance of risk, they're prepared to try and push the pace of innovation. How much do you find you are under pressure to innovate, but are constrained by regulation? Is that something that you see?
Well, yeah, I think, I would agree. So firstly, I think, as we discussed, some regulation is actually there to innovate. If we come back to this PSD2 example, so one of the intentions of that regulation was actually to push for innovation. And of course, banks have a choice to become just a platform to kind of innovation for everyone, because you need to open up your API and allow, well, anyone is too strong statement, but payment initiations, which are actually quite a lot of the companies. It's relatively easy to register a payment company comparing to the bank, to initiate payment and drive the business, or you actually rethink your value proposition. You rethink what customer actually needs, and then you try to either collaborate with those other companies or create yourself some of the services. And I believe in that time there were many interesting things happening. Many banks have widened their e-commerce perspective. There was wallets coming up, instant payments, etc. So there are many things which are coming up. And then your second aspect, is it restricting? I would say in some areas, yes. But as you said, I think it's a level of risk which is taken by different regulators. So what level of competence do we assume, or what level of knowledge do we assume from the customers using the services? And in my view, sometimes the regulator assume it at a lower level than it could be. So in my view, people still need to take also at least some level of accountability for what they do. It cannot be all transferred. Sometimes I feel that regulation is really trying to push all the responsibilities that, customer can do whatever they want. They need to be always protected. I think that's a bit too much. But generally, I would say still regulation is for good, and it has driven a lot of good thinking.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a topic of a conversation about regulation, but market dynamics, right? If you just purely believe in market forces, then almost inevitably the customers that sit with the lowest level of knowledge are the ones that pay the price, right? so certainly I also would agree with you that regulation to protect those individuals is important. But just carrying on this thought about innovation, right? Obviously, the big topic everyone is talking about is AI, right? So, tell us about what your personal views are, right, on what organizations should be thinking about, both in terms of incorporating and adopting AI, right, into their organizations, but also how that then benefits customers, right? What are the benefits that can be accrued, and perhaps some of the things that concern you as well? It's a big topic, I know.
Great question, Sunil. Great question.
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm really concerned of AI. I actually see it more as an opportunity. I certainly believe that it will bring a significant shift into how we work. AI can do a lot of things now. They can write the text, they can make a presentation, they can make a video, they can pass exams to university. Turing test, I hope, guys, that Turing has put that perspective that, if person talking to machine and human cannot anymore distinguish who is machine, who is human, then, it's really an intelligence. So these tests are now passed by many models. However, whenever we go into whatever AI model, it has a small disclaimer everywhere. It can make a mistake. So what does it mean? And it does make a mistake. I'm using AI now, I would say, quite frequently, and it does a mistake. And what does it mean? It still means that we as humans, firstly, need to know what exactly we want to get. Also, coming back to this previous topic. What is outcome we still want to achieve? What does customer need? What do I need? what I'm expecting. And those instructions, this so-called prompt engineering, needs to be done quite specifically. Without knowing what you want, you will not get outcome of AI what you actually really expected to get. Second is you still need to be able to verify what has it done, and then also understand a bit of how it is done. So for example, if it's HTML, SQL, Python, or whatever code generated, it's still probably a good idea to have a look a bit into the code, what is there, and is there a small corrections which needs to be done. They're potentially easier to be done kind of directly by yourself rather than trying to kind of adjust those prompts to get this perfection. But what does it mean? It means that we as humans will be less loaded with how. We still need to understand, structure of Python code, structure of HTML, etc. But our focus needs to go more into being very clear and very specific what exactly we want to get. And sometimes it's easier said than done. I think I have myself been quite many times in a situation where I actually don't fully understand what I want. I start doing and then I learn. So it's human. It's normal. But that is something what needs to be developed, and then yes, verify and then integrate again back. So we still need to be able to integrate. There are more tools. How to put all of that together? As we spoke previously, some time ago there was one machine, mainframe, etc. It was clear who is doing what. Now, if you start even like looking how many AI models are there, I don't think anyone can really fully list and understand what. Like, we still need to understand which model to use, which model is better, which model is not really suitable, which is more specific, which is more generative, how to choose, how to integrate. All this knowledge is still required. Those models still needs to be trained, prompt engineering and so on. So I'm not that afraid of kind of that this is a threat, but obviously, as any new tool, it needs to be used and handled with care and understood what it can do and what it can't.
Yeah, and so that's interesting, because what you're saying is that some of the governance models that we have in place today, that govern tool selection, that govern integration, that govern, control of data, that govern, personal information, all of those models actually are a good starting point for the governance of introducing AI technologies into the way we work.
Well, from that point of view, I actually don't see a major shift in yes, in the way it's organized. We still need to define what we need. We still need to deliver. Delivery can be much faster. Writing a code, maybe instead of spending, 3 days, maybe written in by ChatGPT in a few minutes, and then debugged and checked and adjusted. So it's maybe written in a couple of hours instead. But still, you need to integrate. You as a human still need to make a decision, and you need to verify, especially with the disclaimer that AI can make a mistake. So, of course, humans can also make a mistake. But now we are probably coming to kind of all the other aspects. But at least as human, we understand who is responsible. So if machine made mistake, who is responsible? When I was in my university days, there was a professor, Velo Cook, on operating system. He said, never tell me that your outcome is correct because it's calculated by a computer. It's still you responsible. Nothing changed in these 30 years. It's still human responsible to make sure that machine does what we want. And if machine calculates wrong outcome, it's our fault, not the machine fault.
I know that Dan, you've got one final question, but Viktor, there's a really let's not talk about it now, but there is a really interesting thing about the acceptable level of tolerance for failure, that people will assume that level of allowed failure is much smaller for machines than they would of a human doing the same thing, the same task. So But I think we're seeing that in areas like medicine, for example, that kind of thing. But a totally different conversation. Sorry, Dan, over to you.
No, I agree with your point, and I think there are like this Watson, etc. It's actually much better in diagnosing cancer, but if there is still a mistake, which this machine does, how to treat it. So, but yes, I agree. I think it's much more complex discussion, and we will not be able to kind of conclude on it.
Absolutely not. I mean, it's a great example in the clinical world where the tolerance for error is practically zero, because should there be a mistake, then you get into this whole litigious potential risk analysis and whose fault was it then because of the machine? Is it the programmer? Is it the hardware? Whatever. Anyway, as we've both said, right, it's that's a whole podcast series in of itself, not just an episode. Viktor, it's been very interesting listening to you, and again drawing on the wealth of experience you have and continue to grow it in of yourself. I guess my kind of closing sort of thoughts and question would be, if you were to talk to somebody who's very interested in starting their career within the banking, in the IT aspects around banking, what kind of suggestions and guidance would you perhaps impart on them? And sort of as a follow-on question to that, broader than just the banking industry, what do today's or upcoming IT leaders, kind of what sort of things should they be perhaps thinking about to enjoy the same sort of longevity in their careers as you have? Be keen to hear your thoughts.
Well, yeah, I think maybe it's a bit of coming back to the same point, but I would say that first thing is really to understand the business, understand what is final outcome expected, being able to actually speak on both business as well as technical language with your colleagues. Like if you're part of technology organization, you obviously have some business colleagues to speak with, so you will be able to translate and understand what the customer needs are and put it then connects to the technology. Then connecting to technology, I think then it's actually much more of in addition to technical skills, which still needs to be done, as we spoke. Even if AI is generating a code, you still need to understand how to put it together. But in addition to that, it's much more to inability to integrate, put those different things together. It's not anymore a monolithic systems. It's microservices, containers, suppliers, small things here, there, and there, which all needs to be put together. I actually remembered on one conference there was a good parallel brought. Was this computer mouse? Yeah, costs $10 or maybe $15 or whatever, but probably there are very few people actually how to develop it end to end, starting from oil, electronics, etc. But there are a lot of people who actually know how to integrate, how to put those things together. So this is a competence which is required to put those things together. And then last but not least, humans are still there. We still need to define the targets. We need to verify their fulfillment, put it all together, and make sure that those things, when I put together, they actually are resilient, secure, compliant. We probably don't go into this episode into details on those security breaches, but I'm sure that listeners are aware of many things, recent Marks and Spencer, and etc. So there are many things which are happening and which still require a lot of technical competence, but only technical competence, I believe, may not be enough. It's much more of business and integration on top of it.
Fantastic. Well, so now I don't know if do you have any sort of final thoughts at all, or?
No, I just think that these conversations are fascinating, Viktor, and it's been a real pleasure to have your experience and the kind of your view, right, in terms of what people can move forward with. I think is incredibly valuable. So, just from my perspective, to say thank you.
Indeed. Well, thank you, folks, for listening. If you'd like to find out more, please do reach out to us here at Accession. Viktor, thank you once again. It's been brilliant speaking with you today. And that's all, folks. See you on the next episode.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Sunil. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Hope you found some good ideas, good insight from this talk.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.